When we first get married, we are so excited to walk life's path with our best friend right by our side. But as real life happens, sometimes we realize that that helpmate is less help than we would like them to be. Maybe they're struggling spiritually or maybe physically. Maybe their mental health is not real good or they're feeling a little down and unmotivated. Maybe they spend all their time on their phone. Whatever it is, wherever you feel like your helpmeet is not meeting your needs. Today, we're going to talk about Doctrine and Covenants sections 71 through 75. We're going to pull the principles from those sections and talk about how they apply to real, actual life. So whether you are using this for come follow me or just to strengthen yourself, I think you're going to find some powerful truth today to help you in your personal life. Hi, I'm Jamie Knapp, and welcome to Inner Strength Insights, where we apply the scriptures to everyday life. Today, we're going to jump into Doctrine and Covenants sections 71 through 75. In section 71, verses 5 and 6, the Lord gives us an invitation. He says, "Let him who so readeth, let him understand and receive also." So there's two parts of the coin. We can read the scriptures, which we do, but do we take that next step to receive them into our lives? He continues on, "For unto him that receiveth, it shall be given more abundantly, even power." So it's my prayer that as we talk about these principles today, that you'll not only hear them or read them, but that you'll also receive them, that they can be a part of your life and give you that power that comes through the enabling power of Jesus Christ in your life so that you can move forward in ways you never could without him. So let's find those principles. As we continue on, the Lord says, "No weapon that is formed against you shall prosper. And if any man lift his voice against you, he shall be confounded in mine own due time." So when we are talking about marriage, there's some important things to remember. First of all, it's important to notice that especially if you're talking about one of you living righteously and one of you not living righteously, that can be really hard and really frustrating and honestly really painful. It can feel like betrayal because you made promises to each other when you were married and to God, and one of you is not keeping them. And so in that moment, it can make you feel like you were left behind, that you weren't given the promises you thought you'd have. Life didn't turn out the way you thought it would. And in life, really, that's where a lot of negative emotion comes up for all of us, is when we thought something should happen a certain way and then it doesn't. And this is very true in marriage. We have an idea of what it's going to look like. And so when one person isn't keeping their side of the bargain, it feels like betrayal. And that brings up a lot of very, very real emotions. So how do you navigate that? And how do you keep your faith even when the other person doesn't? So let's talk about what the scriptures say about that. So when the Lord is saying, "No weapon is formed against you shall prosper," I see this as sometimes you can have a spouse that can feel like it's almost an attack against you. Maybe he's critical or she's critical. Maybe it is they're just not helping. And so you feel like everything is against you, that you have to deal with all of the things that are involved in raising kids or taking care of a home. There could be so many reasons, but here what the Lord is saying, and I believe this is a true principle that applies to marriage as well, that if we keep our faith and if we keep our covenants and if we keep obeying the Lord and receiving his word into our heart, that we will be given power, and no weapon that is formed against us, even if that weapon is coming from our spouse, shall prosper. Now, please know that I'm not saying if you are in an abusive situation that you should stay there. That's not at all what I am saying. But what I am saying is that I work with a lot of women especially, and I can honestly say I've never encountered a marriage to this point that didn't have some very, very real struggles. The truth is that no one is perfect, no spouse is perfect, and most of them are very far from. And people put up a good front, so it's easy to look around and think, oh, most people are great, but in reality, nobody is perfect. Everyone has problems, and being married is the most intense personal development program aside from perhaps raising children that you'll ever embark upon. And so this struggle can be real. And so when you are in a point where maybe you feel like your spouse is struggling right now, it's important to recognize that if you keep your covenants, if you keep following the Lord and living righteously, that you will be given power and that you will come out on top. So let's continue on. It says in verse 11, wherefore keep my commandments. So in other words, do what I've asked you to do, and that power is going to come. In the next section, the Lord talks about stewardship. And when I first read this, I thought, okay, this doesn't apply. And then I realized that it actually does. Now, the Lord here is talking about bishops and the law of consecration and how everyone is supposed to give everything they have to give. And then the bishop will decide, you need this, and you need this, and you need this. And like I said, at first I didn't think it applied, but then I realized it absolutely does. And this is why. So let me show you. In section 72, verse 4, it says, he who is faithful and wise in time is accounted worthy to inherit the mansions prepared for him in my Father. So we are talking about being a faithful and wise steward, of taking care of what the Lord has entrusted to you. Now, I'm not a bishop, and thankfully I never will be, but I do have some stewardship over my family, right? And I also have a responsibility to care for my husband, right? And so in those tasks, I have a sense of stewardship. Something the Lord has entrusted me with, and I am accountable to him for how I take care of. And so as we talk about stewardship, I want to just apply the principles to what the Lord has given you and the people the Lord has given you in your life. So he continues on. He says that the bishop is to administer to the wants of the saints, and that each saint will give back what they can, right? Or each saint will be given what they need. But here's what I want to point out to you. In section 72, verse 13, it says, and he who hath not wherewith to pay, an account shall be taken and handed over to the bishop of Zion, who shall pay the debt out of that which the Lord shall put into his hands. So in the Lord's perfect economy, and when they were living this law of consecration, the Lord said, there's going to be people who can't give. And yet I still want you to take from the people who did give and give to them what they need. Now, how does that apply to us? There are going to be times in your marriage where your spouse can't give. Now, you're going to look at him and say, yeah, but he's scrolling on his phone, or yeah, but she is just on social media, whatever it is. And it looks like they should be able to give, and it looks like they're just not. But the truth is that most of the times we all are doing our best, and sometimes our best just isn't very good. There are times and seasons in all of our lives where we're doing really well and we have a lot to give. And then there are other times and seasons when we just don't. And sometimes those seasons can last for a long time. And the Lord here is saying that even when that person doesn't give, that we still need to give. Now, is that saying that you should become a doormat and do everything and not have boundaries? Absolutely not. But I think the principle that does apply here is that there are going to be times in your marriage where it is absolutely not 50-50. In fact, I would say it's going to be like that 99% of the time. It's not going to be 50-50, and that's okay, because we can give more when we have more to give. Where much is given, much is required. That is an eternal principle. So let's continue on. In verse 14, it says, and the labors of the faithful who labor in the spiritual things, in administering the gospel and the things of the kingdom unto the church and unto the world, shall answer the debt unto the bishop of Zion. So there again, those who can give are going to fill the debt for those who cannot. In section 74, verse 1, we read something that I think is really powerful that adds to this. It says, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Now, this is talking in regards to traditions and customs and raising children and all sorts of things, but I think it also applies to spiritual matters. There may be times when your faith is much stronger than your husband's or much stronger than your wife. And if that is the case, then those are times when your faith sanctifies them. What does sanctified mean? I looked it up because I wanted to really wrap my head around what this was talking about. And to sanctify a person is to set that person apart for the use intended by their designer. Sometimes when we are not at our best, we are just not living up to what God designed us to be. But the beauty in this scripture is that once we are married, we become one. And so even if one of you is really, really struggling, the fact that you are united has a sanctifying power on each other. How does that work? Well, there are going to be times when you are a conduit of light to the throne of God. That there may be a lot of darkness or a lot of heaviness or a lot of sorrow or whatever it is in your home. And maybe it's disbelief, whatever is happening in your home. If you are keeping your covenants and if you are being that strength, then you become a conduit of light. And regardless of how much darkness is there, you bring light to your entire home. And because of that, you're able to strengthen the other people in your home. You're able to bless the other people in your home. You are able to bring light to other people in your home. Now, like I said, I'm not saying that you should stay in a situation that is not healthy, but what I am saying is that every one of us will walk through difficult times. And in those difficult times, it's helpful to know that, first of all, it won't last forever, and that we are promised that in the end, we will come out on top. Now, that end may not even be in this life, but we are promised blessings through the journey. And as we are faithful to our covenants and to the things that God is asking us to do, light will come to us and through us to the people we love. Now, one of those difficult things can be when your spouse is struggling to be happy. So if that is something, or if maybe you are that spouse, I do have a video on my other channel that talks about overcoming postpartum blues. And those principles are really helpful if you are trying to overcome a season of sadness in your life. So I will link it so that you can check it out if that is helpful for you as well. And until then, I hope this helped you love your life, live your mission, and empower your kids to do the same. I'll see you next time.